Good, happy Wednesday evening. I'm Riley King, and welcome to the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We have a lot of news to get to this Wednesday evening, so let's begin. First up, Biden slams GOP attacks on voting rights. Let's take a listen to that video from CBS News.
President Biden is condemning Republican efforts to restrict voting access, calling it the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. More than a dozen states have tightened their voting laws since the 2020 election, according to one analysis. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House. Ed, there was also one key issue that the president did not mention in his speech.
That's right, Adriana. Good morning. So far, he has not joined the calls to end the filibuster, that Senate procedural tactic that can limit debate. Many Democrats believe that's what's holding up attempts to pass voting rights legislation without Republican support. But even if the president suddenly endorsed ending the filibuster, he'd have to convince moderate members of his own party to do the same.
21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. We're going to challenge it vigorously.
Speaking from Philadelphia, the birthplace of American democracy, President Biden forcefully attacked voting restrictions being enacted in more than a dozen GOP-controlled states.
Stand up for God's sake and help prevent this concerted effort to undermine our election and the sacred right to vote. Have you no shame?
The White House hopes the president's speech will jumpstart a push for new federal voting rights legislation. But the bills he wants passed can't clear the closely divided Senate unless it abolishes the filibuster. The president also directly addressed unfounded accusations embraced by former President Trump that Democrats stole last year's presidential election.
The big lie is just that, a big lie.
The speech came as more than 50 Democratic state lawmakers left Texas in order to stop debate on GOP elections law changes.
The motion fails for lack of quorum.
They spent their first full day in Washington pushing the Senate to pass voting rights legislation.
We're just hoping to move the needle a little bit more. We're hoping that Congress will understand the urgency.
This is about Americans.
The group met with Vice President Harris and supportive Senate Democrats.
What's happening in Texas by the GOP legislators and governor is just outrageous.
But Republicans continue to dismiss their D.C. trip as a political stunt.
It's disingenuous and downright false to claim that any effort to prevent fraud is a veiled attempt at voter suppression.
And while Texas's governor threatened to arrest the Democrats, they said they're not concerned.
We would not go to jail.
So the Republican-controlled Texas House has ordered Texas law enforcement to round up those Democrats. But the Texas Rangers have no jurisdiction in the Star State. If, however, the Democrats were to return to Texas during the special session, they could indeed be rounded up, brought to the state capitol in Austin, and made to stay there until official business is completed, Adriana.
Wow, Ed. Another one of the president's legislative priorities, of course, is infrastructure. There was news overnight that Democratic senators have reached a deal on a $3.5 trillion plan that they say they'll try to pass without Republican support. How can they do that?
Exactly. Well, we're diving into the Senate toolbox this morning, all the various procedural rules they have. There's one called reconciliation, which allows them to pass a budget bill with a simple majority. All 50 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus, plus the vice president. In order to do that, or they're going to do that now by passing this bill, and it includes a handful of Democratic priorities, among other things. Payment for child care, more funding for child care, expanding Medicare, and addressing climate change. It's unlikely that any Republican is going to support this plan, but it includes a way to pay for the $3.5 trillion price tag. That is why President Biden is headed to the Capitol today to convince those Democrats to sign on. Anthony, you could say we're entering the arm-twisting phase of the Biden presidency.
All right, Ed, thank you very much.
With Realtor.com's home alerts, we found our new desert home really fast. And
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. American journalist is allegedly targeted by Iran kidnappers. Let's take a listen to that video from CBS News.
Now to a dramatic alleged kidnap plot by Iran to seize an Iranian-American journalist living in the U.S. Moscow Masih Alinejad has been an outspoken advocate for women's rights and a critic of human rights abuses in her native country. Prosecutors say Iranian intelligence agents tried to lure her away from her Brooklyn home. Our Jeff Begaze spoke with Alinejad. Jeff, good morning. What did she tell you?
Good morning. This activist has gotten numerous death threats over the years because of her writings and social media posts. She told me that when the FBI showed her surveillance photos of her and her family, allegedly taken by Iranian intelligence, that took the threat to a whole new level.
I was like, wow. So the Islamic Republic is that close to me? Even here in Brooklyn? The nature of the Islamic Republic, kidnapping their dissidents and executing them.
Masih Alinejad has millions of followers on social media where she posts videos she receives from Iranian women defying the regime. The Department of Justice alleges Iran directed a plot to kidnap a U.S.-based journalist and American citizen with the intention to lure our citizen back to Iran as retaliation for their freedom of expression. Alinejad confirms she is that American citizen. According to the indictment, the kidnappers plan to transport the American from New York to Venezuela, a country friendly to the Tehran regime, and from there to Iran. Prior to that plot, they allegedly attempted to induce the American's relatives to lure her to a third country where they would extract her back to Iran, but the family members refused. Last night, Alinejad told me Iranians have gotten used to being scared of their own government.
But this is the time that actually shows you that the government in Iran, they're scared of me. It gives me hope that the government is scared of the voice of people, because I'm the voice of people.
In recent years, Iran has become increasingly aggressive about seizing opposition journalists abroad. Tattered nuclear deal. According to the indictment, 5 critics of the regime were targeted. I take it you're going to keep writing.
Oh yeah, I am not going to give up. If they arrest me or kill me, they cannot keep Iranian people silent who are fighting for freedom.
We have reached out to the Iranian mission at the UN for comment on these charges and so far have not heard back. One of the 5 people indicted is in custody. The 4 who remain at large could face life in prison. Gail.
She's very brave. Thank you. Great hair and a badass too. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Large fires burning in western states with more than 14,000 firefighters on the front lines. Let's take a listen to that video from CBS News.
The leap of faith. Some hesitate, but not you.
Across the country. That's the most in a decade. The summer wildfire season is intensifying with nearly a dozen new fires reported just yesterday alone. So far this year, we've seen more than 33,000 wildfires across the country. That's the most in a decade. The National Interagency Fire Center says the fires have burned 2 million acres. That's an area larger than the state of Delaware. And the biggest and most dangerous fires are all in the west. Lilia Luciano reports on the wide-ranging effort to control them.
From California and Washington to Idaho and Arizona, more than 14,000 firefighters are battling to contain more than 60 wildfires out west. Oregon's Bootleg Fire is now the nation's largest, growing to over 200,000 acres and forcing hundreds from their homes.
It was hungry, it was mean, it was ugly, and it was right there where we could watch it.
In California, crews on the front lines of the Beckwith Fire north of Lake Tahoe captured these dramatic images of flames closing in. Near Yosemite National Park, the River Fire continues to spread across 2 counties during peak tourist season.
It's just really high stress.
Amy Stevens manages a bar and restaurant in the nearby town of Ahwahnee.
Are you adapting to the frequency of these fires and the longer heat?
Absolutely. It is becoming a new normal. It's been so frequent, and every year it's like, when is it going to start? Not is it going to start?
The only power we have is to go, go, go.
Veteran firefighter Zachary Resnick is a squad leader for the Big Bear Hotshots, a highly skilled hand crew that responds to some of the biggest and most dangerous fires. We caught up with the group as they wrapped up their first day on the river fire. What concerns you the most about fires right now?
The lack of resources, and it's not because we don't have a ton of firefighters in California. There's just that many fires.
There are several fires burning within Yosemite National Park. What we know is that those were started by lightning strikes, and park officials tell me that they are very small and they're currently not threatening any park areas where visitors can visit or park services. Adriana.
All right, Livia, stay safe. Thank you so much.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Record level travel is being inflated by the pandemic. Let's take a listen to that video from CBS News.
The rising cost of just about everything in America, from cars to travel. Today's New York Post calls it the incredible shrinking dollar, with prices rising nearly 5.5% year to year, the worst inflation in 13 years. Some of the biggest spikes are in the travel sector, leaving many of us struggling to find better rates for our getaways. Errol Barnett is following this. Errol, what is going on here?
Yeah, hey there, Adriana. Good morning. Look, we have a perfect storm here of high demand and persistent supply chain issues. There are increasing numbers of people who want to get away, but there are decreasing methods of transportation available to get there. And that means higher costs for all of us on the move. And when you drill down into these digits, though, you'll find some reason for optimism later and perhaps some tough choices now.
I think it's highway robbery. Prices are ridiculous right now.
From California gas stations to Florida hotels, the cost of moving around the country is up, way up, including jumps in prices for airfare and car rentals.
We just can't afford it.
Tally Holty lives in Ohio with her boyfriend Mikey O'Malley. Her family is in Washington State, his are in Ireland. So the recent increase in airline prices means difficult decisions.
We really want to go everywhere, do all the things, but because of the prices being so high right now, we can't afford the extra trips.
New inflation numbers show that when compared to 2020, gas prices and the cost of used cars and trucks are each up more than 45%, a record jump for second-hand vehicles. Air travel is up more than 24%, and the cost of a hotel room up almost 17%.
This is a phenomenon that is across the entire economy.
Adam Sachs is president of Tourism Economics and says while this may seem worrisome, looking back further, prices are lower than before the pandemic.
We've been spoiled, and now we're coming back to what might be better considered to be normal pricing.
Sachs says expect prices to keep getting steeper for two reasons.
Partly because we're not fully back to where we were pre-pandemic, both on airfares and on hotel prices, but also because wages are rising in the industry. Because it's been difficult to bring employees back.
Frustrated travelers may have to get used to our new normal. And for Holty, who turns 21 today, that means saving up for a ticket for when she moves to Ireland with her beau later this year.
We're still doing what we need to get those tickets. It's just a bit more of a strain than it used to be on us financially.
United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby on Tuesday said the pandemic is weighing down business travel. It's at only 60% of where it was in 2019. And Adriana, the threat of the Delta variant and virus has its own threat now to a full recovery.
That's right. Errol, thank you so much. You know, one thing to keep in mind, though, even though this is the worst inflation rate in 13 years, because prices were so abnormally low last year, it's making this inflation rate seem so much worse. A lot of these numbers are comparing this year to last year.
It's unnatural in a lot of ways. And by the way, happy 21st birthday to Tally Holty. Very cool.
If you really...
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And let's switch gears now and let's take a look at the weather this evening across the United States. And here's a look at that weather for all of you this evening across the United States. As you can see, there's a few rain in the Boston area, and there's some rain down by Maryland and Virginia and North Carolina, and some rain down by Tampa, Florida, and Miami, Florida, and then some sprinkles of rain in Texas area, in Mexico area as well, and some rain in this section of the United States and this section of the United States as well. And that is a look at your weather for this evening across the United States. And thank you for joining us for this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great evening and see you back here tomorrow with more news coverage. Good night and goodbye.